Hopefully everything will start. But yes, we are all live. So guys, if you just turned into this live conversation, very quickly and briefly before I go into super exciting conversation with Andrea Wanerstrand about growth mindset. This conversation is really important to me because I believe every organization, every manager, and every parent should really discover and cultivate growth mindset around themselves. So Andrea, thank you very much for joining me in today. I'm super excited about this conversation.
Raph, thanks so much for inviting me. I'm excited too. One of my favorite topics is growth mindset, and then pair it with coaching. It's a fantastic thing that I'm excited to talk to you about today.
Yes, I'm just as excited because as soon as I came across your profile and what that you do, and I heard, hey, coaching and growth mindset, I was like, wow, what do I have to do to get into this conversation? Because like I've mentioned, we all have to embrace a little bit more growth mindset. But before we go into that, I'm really curious about your journey with Microsoft and Microsoft itself, because it seems like over the last few years, 2 or 3, I can see a lot of buzz in conversations around Microsoft embracing the culture of feedback and growth mindset, which is not unusual because of this. Microsoft haven't seen many companies being so vocal about those two things. So what's the journey and what's the story behind?
Certainly. Well, under Satya, our CEO, really our Microsoft mission is to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. And that is just a big, bold North Star for us. And our historic business model was a transaction. We sold licenses. And yet when we moved to the cloud, and changed, our mission from, Bill Gates got us, a computer on everyone's desk or in everyone's home. And, that's still an aspiration. But when we talk about empowering people to do more, it simply means the right tools, including that of coaching. With that, anyone can become anything and achieve anything is possible. So it's opening the possibilities. And with that, a growth mindset nests in nicely because, as you know, a growth mindset is about what is possible and reiterating and learning rather than staying in the past with what we've known.
It resonates with me so much, Andrea, when you've mentioned it, because to give someone a gift that they can use throughout their life, I can't think of a better one than growth mindset. And I'm saying it because very early in my sporting career, I was 16 years old, and I remember the exact moment when I discovered the growth mindset. Coincidentally, I had no intention of doing so, but I realized that by wrestling with a stronger opponent every single day, and I had no chance with Cornell, I just asked him to fight me every day, and I was losing like really badly. I realized after a few days that this process develops me. If I'm not attached into the outcome, into the fact that I can't score a point, that I'm keep on losing, I'm growing as an individual. And I thought this is going to be my tool. And it still is today, 22 years later, I'm keep on embracing growth mindset. So the gift that I've discovered and been given through sport 20 years ago allows me to have this conversation and have my podcast with you today. So totally resonate with what you just mentioned.
Well, as a athlete, that it takes practice. You don't run your best time the first time out of the gate, and you can't compete without actually doing some, practice and training and really increasing yourself. And one of my favorite, Carol Dweck, who of course wrote the mindset book and that we based in, is, really in a growth mindset, challenges are exciting rather than threatening. And so rather than thinking, oh, I'm going to reveal my weaknesses, you say, wow, here's a chance to grow. And I think when she said that, it's really about this possibility and opportunity. The greatest innovations we have on the planet didn't come out of the gate the first time. Often it was by trial and error. So it's a spark for what can be. And there's a lot of hope. And I think nowadays we need a lot of hope. So
definitely. It's what you've said. It's about framing and reframing the whole experience, because everything that we come across, every challenge, every problem, everything that we're trying to achieve and working on, there is always going to be a narrative in our minds. And growth mindset, to me, it's about controlling that narrative and making sure that the language that I'm using is... Oh, sorry, I've got some mention about we're having trouble. LinkedIn doesn't want to Okay. Sorry. It's just some error came out with a LinkedIn. I'm not sure why. I'll need to leave it as it is. Sorry. Got distracted. Not what I need. It's about managing and having a control over the narrative in our mind. That's what it is from my experience. How it is from your experience of embracing growth mindset, maybe for yourself and then for your organization.
Well, first and foremost, we're always at choice. Are we going to react or are we going to act? And that's where our emotional intelligence really comes into play, right? I think it's also adopting an insatiable curiosity. And the more you can be curious in everything you do, the more you realize that you don't always get it right the first time. You can aim for that. And if you can be more accepting of yourself. So when you look at helping others in organizations to, really instill a growth mindset, it starts with them. How do they look at their day-to-day actions? How do they treat themselves? And when you start looking at yourself through the lens of a growth mindset and staying in that insatiable curiosity, both about what you're going through and feeling and those around you, it's easier to spark it in others because you're demonstrating it. You're doing a shadow of the leader and modeling it, whether you even know it or not.
So you already answered one of the questions I was planning to ask. Where do we start? And so my understanding is, let's just stay curious for a little bit longer, as Michael Bungay-Stanier always says, and observe how others respond to certain challenges, to feedback, and maybe see it if I'm responding in a similar way. Is that what you're saying?
Well, what Michael says, and yes, my friend Michael Bungay-Stanier, who wrote The Coaching Habit, his phrase is, can you stay curious a little bit longer, rush to action and advice giving just a little bit slower. And it doesn't say don't give advice, right? It doesn't say you have to stay only curious, but you can start with curiosity. So using the Facebook question, what's on your mind? Rather than here's my top of mind. As a leader, when you engage in a conversation and start with what's going on with the individuals around you, you can start to understand where your team really is at and meet them. And it's a form of discernment, if you will. If you really want to bring out the best in people, it's ask them how they want to feel or how they're feeling today. And if they're not feeling the way they want to feel, how do they want to feel? And, and then you can use different things in your quiver, if you will, to help them figure out how they achieve that. It's none of us can make somebody else feel a certain way or do a certain thing, but we can inspire them to be at action and to make a choice.
Yes. So I would like to stay a little bit longer. How can we help our people around us become and embrace that growth mindset and activate it and then cultivate it? Because from my experience, I'm grateful to have that growth mindset. But here's, Andrea, what I struggled a lot. And this was one of my biggest lessons as a manager. When I transitioned from being an athlete to being a manager, I've realized that not everyone is like me. And I struggle with the idea why people don't think that way and why they're not responding to my coaching the way I do. And so I wanted my team to have that growth mindset, but I didn't know what to do. I found myself being frustrated because what worked for me didn't work for them. So let's just imagine I'm going back into my management career right at the early stages. What sort of cues and things that I'm looking for to get from my team to figure out whether they are the growth mindset and fixed mindset? You've mentioned, hey, if I ask you questions and what's on your mind and they're responding back, how do I pick up the cues, whether they gravitating towards that fixed mindset or they already embracing the growth mindset, or there is maybe that small seed of it?
I think it's about discerning, are they looking at the possibilities? And, first and foremost, you've got to back up. Have you created a trusting environment? My HR counterparts would say the psychological safety zone, right? So you're not going to get an honest answer to a question if you haven't set up some trust. Right. So if you come in with a foundation of trust, which often requires empathy and vulnerability, that is the number one thing that's going to enable you to expedite the process. So you're going to start seeing things a little more clearer if you've created a trust foundation. Assuming you had a trust foundation. staying that curious, asking them, what's on their mind, what's the real challenge here, and some of those curiosity type questions, and digging in with them and staying, like you quoted Michael Bungay Stanier, it's not jumping in with our advice, and really listening. So it's the discernment of what's going on here, and figuring out to meet them where they're at. So you asked, what are some signs? Some signs would be, words like we can't, or we're stuck and we can't move forward. And then if you were to ask them, so what do you think the options are? Or if you opened, woke up tomorrow and it was the way you want it to be, what would that look like? And explore the possibilities. If they're really resisting exploring those possibilities, then more likely they're stuck in that fixed mindset right now. We've done it this way before, it's still not working, and it seems like they're in a place of overwhelm. Those are signals for you that they're stuck.
Yeah. So from my experience, I've realized that my thoughts can go either in the past, like, what I've done wasn't working in the past, didn't work, or my language, my self-talk evolves around not being good enough and attaching the feedback and outcome with my identity as well. So that's what I learned from my experience, that I'm getting stuck in that fixed mindset when I'm starting looking or spending too much time in the past, and like you mentioned, not exploring these possibilities in the future. So what I understand is we have to jumpstart a conversation and then move as soon as possible to the future, and move talking about what's possible, what we're going to do in the future, and how it will look like. It will just start creating this picture of what's possible and how we're going to get there. In other words, get you away from judging yourself negatively and looking at the failures, if you will, right?
Yeah, it's turning those misfires, those things that didn't work out the way we wanted them to or expected them to, into what did I learn out about it, and what can I take forward from that. You also mentioned something about, what worked for you doesn't necessarily work for your team. And as we progress throughout our careers, Marshall Goldsmith, who I'm a big fan of as well, talks about what got you here won't get you there.
Yes.
Right. And so, and there's a lot out there from psychometric scales of like different styles, different perspectives. And the only way you're going to figure out what works for your employee, and between you and that employee having a productive, effective employer-employee relationship, is through curiosity. Ask them, individuals that understand that their talents can be developed and utilize strategies. Often, they tend to have that growth mindset. Those who, believe that this is all I'm capable of, have these limiting beliefs. And sometimes during curiosity between a manager and employee, you can kind of break through that and say, but what if there's more? What if there, was an opportunity for you to do X, Y, and Z? And help them see that there are possibilities.
Yes. I need to embrace these answers because it's really, really powerful. I wasn't having this conversation around as much what's possible and let them give me the answers my way. And I'm trying to really go back in my way. One of my ways was maybe if I change the language that we're operating within our team, it will help them to stop talking about problems and they can't be fixed, they can't be done. And I shift everything towards a challenges, to the point where my team would come to me and I would ask them not to say, hey, here's the problem, hey, here's the challenge. Is this something that you've tried yourself, or maybe something that you're doing in Microsoft as well, reframing it towards challenges, or you're okay with using the words problems? Because I know different people have different opinions about it. For me, everything is all about challenges, including using deliberately the language. But I'm curious to find out what are your thoughts around the wording here?
Wording is important. And, when you step in and demonstrate positive leadership, it's choosing a word that people naturally can embrace. A challenge is like a puzzle. It can be figured out. A problem is a barrier to a lot of folks. And we work in a global environment in my day job here at Microsoft. And so, yes, it doesn't always mean the same thing, but similarly, what you're pointing out is if you say, okay, we've got a problem versus, and it's like everybody there's a negative energy to that, right? Versus, hey, we've got a challenge. Let's brainstorm what this could look like.
Yeah.
That simple shift in the word to say a challenge is something that's conquerable. A problem is got a negative connotation to it. So there's this aspect of showing up with positive leadership and really encouraging folks to problem solve, if you will. And in that nature, problem solving is a little more positive than just proclaiming and labeling something a problem or an issue, right?
Yes, absolutely. And from my experience also, people use the word of problem as in it's not my problem anymore, it's someone else's, it's not fixable, I just pass it on, it's no longer in my hands, Ralph, that's in yours now, I've got nothing to do with it. And I'm like, we need to do it together. So hey, what's the challenge? And I always show that excitement. Let's just get it done. Let's just see how can we solve it, how can we get better as a result of that. And that's my focus on how can we get better by facing that challenge. That's how I work with myself, at least it does work for me.
Absolutely.
So the word challenge, I'm curious now, because what is the current challenge that you're facing and going against? I really want to know, if you don't mind.
Oh, current challenge. I think for me, in some of the work that I'm doing is really helping managers understand that there is a variety of techniques in their quiver that they can pull out in a conversation. We talk about feedback conversations or coaching conversations, and I've literally had managers from all over the globe say, okay, you want me to have a coaching conversation, but when do I give them feedback? And it's really, I'm an advocate of a manager with a coach approach, being more coach-like, understands when to coach, and they choose the right conversation technique for the situation. So we talked about the skill of listening. And with them, every time you meet a stranger, you're discerning, hey, what do they know? What are they interested in? And we need to apply that in every conversation. A manager can always be more coach-like. And so one of the challenges that we're facing right now is helping managers understand the ease by which you can float in a single conversation between you being more coach-like and using coaching techniques, as well as giving feedback, sometimes mentoring, sometimes teaching. Maybe the situation's extremely steep or they're new to it, and you can actually do more damage by straight out coaching them. Coaching infers the answers within them. Well, if they don't know it at all yet, and you know that, then, maybe it's a moment to teach. So one of the challenges that I'm facing right now is really helping managers across the globe understand how to have an integrated, effective, timely conversation.
Wow, quite a challenge. I'll come back to it in a second. For me, when the way I frame things for myself is, and my view of the feedback is actually, for me, feedback is a jump starter to coaching conversation often. It's not as much separated, and it's not what I do. It's, of course, there are times, as you mentioned, there's times for feedback. Sometimes you just have to give advice, maybe sometimes it's the coaching. Absolutely. But for me, the mindset I think managers have to implement and understand is that the feedback is actually a jump starter to coaching, because feedback on its own quite often is damaging, because it's just you imposing your opinion and walked away. And where's support for me? And then we label it as something negative, and then future conversation is like, well, another feedback, there will be no value. I just gonna get a label in a certain way. There's nothing good about it. I don't learn from it. So for me, feedback is that jump starter towards conversation, coaching conversation, if you will.
Absolutely. And you hit on this a bit. There's also this misnomer that feedback is all about missed opportunities or something that you did wrong. Positive reinforcement feedback, and doing that more than the negative feedback, actually can inspire and help your team for growth and business performance more than anything else, really.
Yes.
Hey, you did a great job here, or I saw that, and look at the impact you have, especially when you can tie it to something tangible, such as you had that conversation with the customer and you opened up their eyes about the differentiators we have in our products. That was really amazing. I love seeing that. Just telling a salesperson in this case, something like that, the manager, and giving that feedback, it's amazing. And then you can, get in there and be more coach-like and say, hey, and what was most valuable for you in this engagement with a customer? Here's what I observed.
Yeah.
And keep that curiosity going. Absolutely. Feedback is super powerful, and it is a jump starter, both in the positive reinforcement and in corrective, observation and redirection.
Absolutely, Andrea. And just watch what happens when you approach positive feedback from the angle that you just mentioned. You can see that the spark in the people's eyes and how happy they are. And now you've got this psychological safety, as you mentioned, created. And that means you can now move a little bit more into coaching conversation. It means people are more open towards something. And I always said that positive feedback is one of the most powerful coaching tool, at the same time, one of the least utilized one. Just imagine yourself as a manager. Pick one behavior that you want to see more of. That's all you have to do, just one. And compliment the person about it. And like you've mentioned, what was the valuable part of it? How did you arrive to that point? And they will verbalize it, reinforce that, and you'll be like, oh yeah, that's how I achieved that. And now I'm going to recreate this feeling to someone else. That's how powerful positive feedback is, right? Wow.
Absolutely. Especially if you want behavior change, right? It's the little moments over time that get the sticky factor for us to change our behaviors. We take great classes, read great books, have great coach moments, but it's the day-to-day consistency. And so, for me, I'm all about leading before you manage. And, knowing that an extraordinary leader knows it's in the doing, it's not in the being. And if you're going to do something, do you show up authentic, show up real, show up yourself, and, be human. And so the more you can do that with a positive tone, the more you're undercurrenting an environment of possibility, and thus a growth mindset.
Absolutely. Wow. So let's just pretend for a second that I'm a lucky person. I'm joining your team, Andrea, and I'm more on a fixed mindset side. Where would you start the journey with me to show me the growth mindset? Would it be straight directly and say, hey, this is the concept that we're embracing and this is what it is and I'm going to go through it? Or are you more of an ambassador of letting people discovering the power of and going through the process? Where would you start with me?
I think where I would start is understanding the underlying reasons, the beliefs around your behaviors that are limiting, that you believe are blockers for you to achieve more. Right. So it probably would be in a conversation about, how do you embrace failure? How do you embrace times where you have not achieved the exact results that you're going for? And I say that in the aspect that so many folks feel that they haven't achieved it. Now, you being an athlete, it probably wasn't as great getting second place as it was first, right?
At the time in the past, yeah.
But that's still a significant achievement if you look at all those who didn't place at all.
Yeah.
So really understanding where the limiting beliefs are with the individual, and understanding, once you understand what those beliefs are, maybe they've been told, this is what your limit is. We learn these things. We don't, we have curiosity as children, and somewhere along the line, we find our safety barriers. We figure out, hey, when I do X, Y, or Z, people tell me that's right. So this is safe. This is comfortable, and it's not going to hurt. But in order to have a growth mindset, you got to take risk, right?
Yeah.
And that goes against our human nature. So it's one thing for us to tell about a growth mindset, But if you really want to get the behavior change happening in the individuals around you, you've really got to understand what their drivers are. And you can do that through curiosity. And,
Right.
maybe you have a team discussion about a growth mindset and how you as a team, and you can have sharing. There's different techniques to do that. But the most poignant moment to do a shift is in that one-to-one conversation with, building on a foundation of trust.
When I was a manager, I did my very first solo workshop for my team was about actually growth mindset. And I was like, if there's one gift that I can guys give you, that will be it. And I was like, I'll do my very best with conveying the message. It was my first attempt. And the example that I used, I was kind of like, I like to use myself as an example to show things, what I am on my journey, and transparency is really important to me. And I said, look, what I want to do in the future is to speak in front of thousands and spread my message. But today I'm scared talking in front of you 10. And I just broke it down, what I see myself and what I think about the possibilities that you've mentioned. And I've acknowledged that I'm nowhere near where I need to be. But by applying these tools and this growth mindset, this is what I go. When I first joined this business with you together, guys, this is where I was. This is how I grow because of that growth mindset. That's what helped me to explore. And I suppose one way of making this growth mindset more alive is by showcasing the journey that we all have taken as a team, as a business, as an individuals, and helping people highlight that. So that it's it becomes a daily language, if you will, that the possibilities and where we are heading towards, what is the wording, the challenge, and so on and so forth. So that's certainly something that I advise, and I wish, and I hope people will pick up from this episode, is to change small habits, how we communicate, and be a little bit more curious, as you've mentioned as well.
Absolutely. If you stem it into your team environment, there's this thing called social cognitive theory. And at its simplest form is, I'm more apt to do it if I see you doing it too, right? And, whether it's starting off a meeting with a check-in of something that everyone's grateful for, gratitude, just getting that personal connection. And I don't mean personal connection that you have to become their best friends. It's about caring and showing humanity with those that are around you. And when you do that, you build a foundation of trust. And so when they do have a blocker and say, we can't do that, just say, well, what would it look like if we could? Or what would it take for you to believe that we could? And really dig in with curiosity. Don't do an inspection drill on them, but just be honest and sincere in your curiosity. And also feed into what you were talking earlier, the whole with them. What's in it for me? What is it going to take for them to find value in changing their behavior and embracing the risk of a growth mindset? If you can discover that, that's gold, for the fact that if you can help them overcome that barrier and really understand that your goal was to talk in front of 10,000 people, and, putting it out on the internet like that right now, you're achieving it, right? But you have to start someplace. So find out what their goals are, find out what their passions are, find out what they want to achieve, and how do they want to feel. And if they're feeling scared, if they're feeling judged, if they're feeling that things are overwhelming and not possible, as the manager, you can start removing those barriers.
Yeah. And also, I'm guessing that those goals are as well outside of your professional environment as much as within the professional, right? We don't really have to have the conversation only about what's your goal within my company, within my department, and with your job description. I think what worked for me in the past is really talk about you as an individual and what are your goals, your passions, where you want to head, and then start finding opportunities within work to develop certain skills that will help you to move towards that direction. So if we talk about my one, becoming a public speaker one day, would be, well, are there any town hall meetings within my company that you could start participate in and practice a little bit more those conversations? And then I start highlighting your journey and showing you, see, this is what happens when you pay a little bit more attention, focus on the growth and moving from one point to another one. I think that's a really good way of developing this growth mindset within people. what I really learned now from you, and I really have to walk away and think about, is how am I going to put all those things that you just mentioned to me with my younger son Xavier? Because you mentioned when people like showing this mindset that is kind of like a bit more fixed one and still stay curious and show what's possible. I've got two boys, Nathan, older, and Xavier. Nathan is like me, an athlete. And so it was very easy for me to install that growth mindset with him. Xavier, on the other hand, told me one day, "Oh, I hate challenges." And I was like, "Oof, that hurts." I mean, I was like, "What do you mean you don't like?" I literally, I got slightly angry. It's like, "No, I'm failing as a father. Like, this is already fixed mindset." Never mind. I was like, "I need to change that." But I realized I can't just impose that into him. I can't force him to love challenges. I need to find a different way, a lot more patient way, and playing a long game with him in terms of discovering it and embracing it. So I'll definitely put all of those things that you've mentioned to me, even with my son. And I've mentioned at the beginning of this episode, it's as important for managers as it is for parents as well. We mentioned briefly something about setting up the goals and the life goals. How would you advise managers to set up the goals that would be growth mindset oriented, not fixed mindset oriented? Because from my experience, I always wanted to implement it because growth mindset within my team. And then let's say there was appraisal, team appraisal time. And I got this sheet with questions, and it was, I had to mark things in certain ways. And a lot of it was like a fixed mindset focus more than growth mindset. And I was like, how do I set up the goals for my team so they are really a growth mindset? So my question for you is, how do we do that? How can I start as a manager setting up goals for my team, for individuals? So I'm already instilling and hinting and putting those seeds of growth mindset there. So when we have this conversation, whether it's in a 2 months time, 6 months time, we're still within that growth mindset framework.
Certainly. Clarifying question. What does a growth mindset goal look like to you versus a fixed mindset goal look like?
To me.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, it's, good question. Because more of it, wow. For me, it's about understanding that every experience is a growth. That what I am today is not what I'm going to be tomorrow. And number two, embracing it with excitement. So that's what it looks like to me. So maybe I should give you the different answer. The better answer would that be that the way I position myself always, my life philosophy is to imagine myself constantly being David facing down the Goliath. Everything that I pick up on, I envision it as I'm the David, I'm facing up the Goliath. Whether it's a podcast, whether it's a live streaming, or having conversation with such a great individuals like yourself, I'm the David. This is something that is, I could very easily get overwhelmed by it because, wow, the impact that you have in the world and what you've achieved, I'm nowhere near, and I understand that. But I don't allow myself diminishing my status. I just see myself, this is the experience that after this 1 hour, I'm gonna grow tremendously and get closer to my life purpose. Regardless of the outcome, I've learned to compete without needing to win. So that's how I view it. So what I'm expecting, let's just use my son as an example, is him at least having a go at the challenge rather than first answer would be, I don't know how to do it. It irritates me. Like I tell him something and he has this habit of saying, I don't know. I'm like, let's just not start with I don't know, because you have those answers, you're just not getting them out. So for me, it's about understanding that, well, if I don't know, that's fine. Let's figure it out. Using this language of what's possible, how we can fix it. That's sort of my framework and my understanding of that is.
So if you were to set a goal for your son, I think you just started setting an example there. If you were to set a goal for your son in this case, when he says, I don't know how, and what would it look like that it was a growth mindset? Would it be, what would it look like?
It would look like, so the other day he actually replied back to me, let me think about it. And I was happy already. What it looked like to me that he didn't give up from the get-go. Maybe that's the answer. That's what made me happy. I didn't want him to have those answers. That's not important to me. Whether you have those or not, I can't expect you to have all those answers. It's just, it's not possible. What I want from you is that having that attitude that you haven't given up before you even started, or as soon as you started, you already gave up. So for me, how it would look like is not giving up, at least for the very first few minutes. So we are giving ourselves the chance to explore those possibilities.
Fantastic. So what that reminds me of, at least in our household, there's a great book called The Four Agreements. And two of those agreements are, um, don't take anything personally. And the one that we use as a mantra in our house, and I've used with my teenage son his whole life, is do your best. It's not about being the best, it's do your best, right? And our best changes every day as to how we're showing up. So go back to your question of how would you write this into a person's goals from a performance review perspective? I think, so many companies are driven by key performance indicators, and depending on the role and what the motivation is for the compensation, there's a whole, bevy of information that probably goes into a goal.
Mm-hmm.
But it's, do they try their best? Do they look at all the opportunities? Are they inclusive in bringing others along in the journey? How do they do the work? How do they show up every day? Has to count as much as what they've achieved.
Mm-hmm.
And are they, adding to the culture of those around them? Are they building on the ideas of others? And
Mm-hmm.
so I think it's not necessarily in a description of exactly what is to be achieved. There's
Mm-hmm.
this factor of how it's achieved,
Yeah.
that the growth mindset comes into play.
Mm-hmm. So I was super happy when you mentioned do your best, because again, something that I was doing in the past, and I keep on mentioning it because I'd like to share my experience. So maybe you correct me, or the managers can learn from what worked for me. Is that if I would have a team meeting, like a team brief, every form, I would always finish it with just do your best, be your best version of yourself today, right? And so I would always slip it into the conversation that what I'm asking you to do is to do your best, whatever that means to you and what it is. So that language would be always there. But when you've mentioned that do your best, there is another question that popped into my mind and I was guilty of it numbers of times as well. And especially when you're a little bit of irritated when somebody, you ask them to do their best, they do their best, but to you, it's just like, I thought it's going to be here, but you've done here and you're telling me it's your best. And so how should I come back to this conversation with my son or my employee? Because the urge for me is there to say, well, was that your best? Which is closed-ended question, and it's very judgmental. I'm already implying that it wasn't. I'm disappointed. So how do I urge that? How do I resist that urge to say this question? How can I frame it differently when I know that your best is here and that's what I'm actually expecting, but you've done it here and you see it as your best? What can I do so I don't come across as judgmental and allow them to understand it? I'm really curious about that now.
Well, I would start with curiosity. So you're right. We have to hold our judgment back, because once you put it out there, your words have actually set the tone of the rest of the conversation. And so you saw potential. You saw that this individual, whether it's your son or the employee, could achieve a certain level, and they didn't achieve that. So one of the first things that you can do is, and you have to be somewhat timely about this, say, hey, in that meeting with the customer yesterday, we'd set some goals. How do you feel you did? And did you notice I asked them, how do you feel you did? We want to get to their gut. We want to get them into the emotion a little bit. And then maybe they say, hey, I think I did great. Okay. What do you think you could build upon next time? How could you make this even more? Right? To see if they see the potential. So you have to come in and kind of mine for the gold, right? It's in there. And then you can step into some feedback at this point. Say, I think you've got some valid points. You did a great job with this and this and this. And that's a judgment statement. Yeah. But they are looking to you as the manager to, do an evaluation statement of some sort. And say, and where I see the opportunity for you to step in even further is, and then be very constructive on what that is, versus if you start off and say, yeah, that just didn't meet my expectations yesterday. You've killed the moment. You've killed the opportunity for learning. Whereas if you can really understand what they think, maybe they think they didn't do their best either, right? So, yeah, I was having an off day. Okay, let's go into that. But you can always start in with curiosity and then bring in that tool of feedback through observation and redirecting them to understand that you believe that they're capable of more. It's getting their confidence up. Coaching is a confidence enabler. Similar to mentoring, sometimes you have to step in and mentor, and that is sharing your scars, meaning somebody survived the battle and they came through it, but how you can help them move forward. So you're right. You have to step back from the judgment. You have to be able to, dig for the gold as far as understanding what's really going on. How are they feeling about things? And then talk about what's the possibility to build upon where they're at, meet them where they're at and help them go further.
Here's what I picked up from the sentence that you've mentioned, and the difference to me, that probably even subconsciously how we coach people, how we were told to coach, and what's the instinct is. You've mentioned, this is what you could do to improve even further, which is moving forward and improvement language versus next time to do it better, you can do X and Y and Z. And I'm guessing this instinct is to use the latter one, next time to do it better, do that, which already instinct is, it's a fixed mindset. And I'm only telling you, well, it's all about doing it, judging that one, and just to improving it and do it here versus, hey, next time just to move forward to get your best is it's a journey. So let's just keep on moving forward. And so that's the difference for me that I like to always tune into. As David Marquez says, leadership is a language. The small words, they do matter. And what I like from it is with that one sentence, what you did, Andrea, is you say, hey, this is how we can move forward next time. Just not next time, but what you said is like, let's just improve it even further. So there is improvement, let's improve it even further versus next time to do it better or next time to do it that way. Right, got it. Love one, good one. There is one question that I always ask my guests, and I'm super curious about it as well, Andrea. Who's the best coach-like leader that you worked? I'll say for, not with. I tend to say with, but you already mentioned Michael Bungestanier. I know he did some work with you guys. You've mentioned Marshall Goldsmith. Let's just stick with that you worked for. Who's the best coach-like leader that you worked for in your career?
Her name is Debra Lewis, and she was a vice president of T-Mobile USA. And she saw something in me that I didn't even see in myself. And she started me on this journey of really about the people. And, she recognized my contributions. She had my back in tough times. And again, she saw something in me. She brought me in as the director of org effectiveness, and I had no HR background. I had been working in putting in ERP systems, and she took a real leap of faith with me. And it was, it was awe-inspiring that somebody could see something in me that I didn't see myself. For a long time, I struggled in feeling like I was worthy, like, oh, I don't have the right background, I don't have the right certifications, I don't have this or that. And that would show up in my presence. And she had a great way of coaching me to say, look, you belong here. You were, I brought you here to do a job, and you're more than capable of doing it. So I would say from a moment in time, she was, a very pivotal manager that I've had. I've had fantastic managers over the years, and I've had some not so fantastic managers over the years. And I learned from all of them. And I have wonderful, access to fantastic coaches all over the world. But some of the simplest coaching that I've got are not actually from professional coaches. So they might be just colleagues that I'm working with that have been cheerleaders in my corner or given me constructive feedback, or even sometimes a stranger on the street reminding me to smile in that moment when, maybe the weight of the world is on my shoulder and I've got a frown face on. So interesting question. I had to think about that one coming into today. So thank you.
No, you're welcome. I'm always curious to learn what are the other great coach-like leaders do for others, so we can all learn from it. We can all see that sometimes it does take a lot of courage and skill set to see a more potential with individuals and with yourself, Andrea, like you've mentioned. But what I love about this is that you wouldn't looked at through your current achievements, and that's very much already sort of growth mindset approach. Rather than looking, hey, you don't have those qualifications, you haven't done this X and Y and Z. I can see potential. Let's just get you in, and we're going to work towards it. And on the personal level, it really resonates with me, because my journey that I set myself on, it has the same mindset. I don't have those qualifications that I suppose that I should have, but it's easy to say, hey, I shouldn't be a feedback coach because I don't have X, Y, and Z. I haven't worked for Fortune 500. I haven't done this. I'm a guy from hospitality who has loads of passion. And you know what? For me, that's enough. That's enough for me. So when you mentioned that story, I was like, feels good. It feels great that people can progress and should progress despite not having this paper in your hand. So I'm getting now, I'm carrying myself away, because wow, lovely answer. I love it, Andrea. Absolutely love it. Thank you very much for your conversation today. I've learned so much. I've made so many notes, and as I'm going to listen to this episode and editing it, I'll be learning from it and putting it all in place with my younger son Xavier, so I can develop that growth mindset I want him to have. So as we mentioned right at the beginning, it's a gift that keeps on giving throughout our lives, right?
Absolutely. And, I look at managers and leaders, the number one thing that we have as far as a remit is to inspire those around us. And we do that by increasing their confidence. And coaching is one of the best levers to do that, and then integrating that with all of our other skills. So I highly encourage, folks to practice and apply it inside and outside of work, and show up curious with everyone you meet. You just might learn something insightful that you didn't know about the other person.
Definitely. Well, what a great way to almost wrap up the episode. I would love to just hear from you what we can get in touch with you. I know you're a bit of active on LinkedIn. You've got your own personal website, and I'll drop the links in the description of the podcast. Where else we can get in touch with you, learn more about you, learn from you?
Absolutely. So best way is to follow me on LinkedIn. I also have my website, AndreaWanerstrand.com, where I have a leadership newsletter that I send out to folks. Those are the best avenues to do that. And I post on both of them where I'm going to be next, and getting to speak with great people such as yourself that have this passion for really helping positive leadership come into the world.
So just very quickly, what's the next step in your journey? Where are you next heading towards?
Oh, in 2021, we're doing some exciting things at Microsoft, and regarding some of our growth mindset work. And personally, I have some speaking events in 2021, and maybe a little possible book in the works. So,
possible book in the works. That means there is one. Wow. So I'm definitely gonna keep my eyes open for that one when it comes out, and certainly we'll sign up for your newsletter. I want to learn more, because coaching and growth mindset is such an important topic for myself. So thank you very much for being so generous with your time, Andrea, and share your wisdom with us. I really appreciate that, and have a good day on purpose.
Raf, thank you for the time here. I think you're doing wonderful things with, being a feedback coach. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Bye-bye. Bam, bam, bam. Right, this is the time when I need to quickly cut off. This is the downside of doing live streams.